Almost every country in the world is in debt. The debt of the United States has surpassed $38 trillion. dollars. This is the highest level in its history. The European Union is in debt by approximately $14 trillion. dollars. Japan's debt has reached around $9 trillion. dollars. Oil-rich Saudi Arabia, export giants like Germany and China, just think about it. Even they are buried in debt. At this point, a very simple yet deeply unsettling question comes to mind. If everyone is in debt, then who do we owe? This question takes us to the point where money, power, and history collide. And this needs to be said from the very beginning. It's not as simple as it looks. Debt is not just a burden, it is in fact the anatomy of the modern world. The economy as we know it today, wars, crises, rises and collapses, all of them are built on this invisible debt system. If you follow the chain of debt long enough, you encounter an interesting truth. The world is not actually in debt to a specific someone. It is in debt to itself. But this does not mean that everyone benefits equally from this system. Today, total global debt has exceeded $315 trillion. dollars. This figure is nearly 3 times the size of the global economy. So how did we get here? The answer is not hidden in credit cards or mobile banking. It lies much further back, in the heart of wars. Let's go back to the year 1694. England is at war with France, and its treasury is completely empty. Gold has run out. The king turns to the merchants. "Give me money now," he says, "and I will pay you regular interest from future taxes." To manage this system, the Bank of England is established. This was an incredible turning point. From that moment on, the state could spend money it had not yet earned. And the lenders received something tangible, the promise of the state. A promise that could be bought, sold, and transferred. Thus, government bonds were born, the foundation of modern finance. France adopted this system. The Netherlands refined it. America used it to finance its independence and westward expansion. Over time, debt stopped being a symbol of failure. On the contrary, it became a measure of credibility. If you could borrow, it meant you could govern. In the past, empires conquered land to extract gold. Now they issue bonds to earn interest. The battlefield turned into a balance sheet. Today, debt is the world's most familiar product. The United States is $38 trillion dollars in debt. Japan owes over $9 trillion dollars. Global debt increases by nearly $1 trillion dollars every 100 days. Everyone is in debt. And everyone is also in some way a creditor. So who is on the other end of the rope? Let's take a closer look at the United States because its debt is not only national, it is global. About half of this debt is held by investors. But most of these investors are not foreign. They are American banks, pension funds, insurance companies, and the Federal Reserve. The foreign-held portion is about $9 trillion. dollars. Japan holds the largest share, followed by China. So the phrase, "the U.S. owes China," is not entirely wrong, but it is very close to misleading. The majority of America's debt actually belongs to America itself. The Treasury issues bonds, funds buy them, the Fed buys them back and creates new dollars. Americans pay taxes. Those taxes turn into interest and flow back into American pension accounts. A closed loop. The debt is real, but the creditor is often the system itself. This isn't unique to the United States. Japan lends, Europe borrows. Through the IMF and the World Bank, money flows to developing countries. Those countries then invest their reserves back into developed economies. It's a global game of hot potato, except the potato is made of promises. Everyone holds someone else's debt. Every promise is backed by another promise, like a poker game where no one can afford to leave the table. And above all of this, there is another layer, the markets. Massive funds, central banks, sovereign wealth funds. These are the real referees. They decide who can borrow cheaply and who must pay a premium just to survive. When confidence disappears, currencies collapse and governments fall. Central banks play a critical role here because they don't just manage debt, they create it. When they buy bonds, they print new money. One entity's debt becomes another's asset. That's why there is no such thing as debt-free money. The system has been standing on trust for a long time, but we have seen what happens when trust breaks. Greece, Argentina, Sri Lanka. Interest rates exploded. The IMF stepped in, austerity followed. Unemployment, poverty, social collapse. Yet here's the strange part. Even after collapse, the system starts over from scratch. New debts replace old ones. Because in the modern world, debt was not designed to be repaid. It was designed to be rolled over. Governments do not plan to pay off their debts. This is not a conspiracy. It is an open policy. Debt is like a constantly renewed subscription. The real product is interest. The global economy depends on it, like a fish that has to keep swimming to survive. The United States will never fully pay off its debt. Japan has lived for decades with debt exceeding twice its GDP. And yet nothing seems to break. Because government bonds are not seen as liabilities, they are assets. The system needs them. If debt were actually paid off, the system would collapse. That's why the goal is not to eliminate debt, but to keep it sustainable enough for everyone to continue believing in it. But this trust is not distributed equally. Interest payments flow upward. Debt is not just a transfer between countries, it is a transfer between classes. That's why inequality and debt grow together. In the end, we arrive here. Creditors are not evil. Debtors are not innocent. They are all parts of the same machine. The real problem is what happens when the machine stops working. And when that day comes, the question, who do we owe, will stop being theoretical. It will become personal because modern finance has turned debt into money. The lines have blurred. Debt once meant slavery. Today it means balance. But if that balance breaks, we remember what debt really is, a promise that cannot be kept forever.